A German Shepherd puppy lay dying on the highway until a U.S. Marine stepped into the rain. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's return to our main character. He wasn't supposed to survive. Not under a sky like this, not on a night when the rain fell in cold, heavy sheets that blurred the headlights crawling along Highway 47. The air smelled of wet asphalt and distant pine, a scent that carried the hush of something fragile hanging by a thread. In the middle of the right lane, small enough to be mistaken for a fallen glove or a piece of torn fabric, lay a German Shepherd puppy no bigger than a loaf of bread. His fur, once soft and warm, clung to his tiny frame in dark, soaked patches. Each shallow rise of his chest was a plea whispered into the storm, a breath that might be his last. Cars swerved around him, tires hissing, unaware of the life trembling inches from their wheels. And yet, even in the storm's roar, there was a strange stillness around him, as if the night itself held its breath. A pair of headlights slowed far behind, cutting a slender beam through the rain. The wipers beat a steady rhythm, fighting the blur of water and darkness. Inside the truck sat Staff Sergeant Daniel Mercer, his uniform jacket still damp from an earlier patrol, the faint metallic scent of his dog tags mixing with the cab's warm air. Dan wasn't supposed to be on this road tonight. He had taken a detour, instinct, maybe, or something quieter guiding him through the storm. As he approached the curve, something on the asphalt caught his eye. A flicker. A shape. Too still to be debris. Too small to be anything but helpless. His grip tightened on the steering wheel, a breath caught in his throat. He eased off the gas. The world outside dimmed, narrowed, focused. Rain hammered the windshield like a warning, but the feeling in his chest was stronger. A pull. A knowing. He slowed to a crawl, heart thudding, eyes locked on the tiny body sprawled ahead. The storm raged. The highway hissed. And somewhere beneath the noise, a life waited, silent, fading, but not yet gone. Rain washed across the windshield as Daniel brought his truck to a full stop, the engine humming low like a steady breath trying to calm the night. For a moment he simply sat there, hands still on the wheel, feeling that quiet pull deepen inside his chest. The storm blurred everything beyond the glass, yet the small shape on the road remained unmistakable, a fragile outline waiting in the glow of his headlights. Daniel flipped on his hazard lights, their soft amber pulse reflecting off wet pavement. The world around him slowed, softened by the curtain of rain. He stepped out into the cold night, the air sharp against his face, his boots sinking slightly into the slick surface as water streamed along the roadside. The highway carried a faint hum from distant traffic, but here, in this pocket of stormlit silence, it felt like time held its breath. He walked carefully toward the tiny form, each step steady and deliberate. The rain drifted down his jacket sleeves, gathering at his fingertips before falling to the ground. The scent of wet asphalt rose around him, mingling with the metallic tang of the storm. When he reached the puppy, he knelt slowly, lowering himself until he was level with the fragile life lying before him. The little one's chest lifted in faint, uneven breaths, a rhythm so fragile it felt like it could slip away at any moment. Daniel extended a hand, not touching at first, just letting his warmth hover near the soaked fur. "Hey, buddy," he whispered, his voice hardly louder than the rain. "I am right here." A soft tremor fluttered through the puppy's paw, barely noticeable, but enough to draw Daniel in closer. He eased his jacket open and draped it gently over the small body, creating a barrier between the cold rain and that flickering breath. The warmth of the fabric seemed to settle something, and the puppy released a faint exhale that fogged in the chilled air. Daniel slid one hand beneath the tiny frame, feeling how light he was, almost weightless. The puppy's head shifted weakly, resting against his palm as if seeking what little comfort it could find. The storm dimmed around them, its roar fading beneath the quiet urgency that now filled Daniel's thoughts. He could feel the softness of the puppy's fur through the wet fabric, the fragile rise and fall of a life fighting to remain here. With slow precision he lifted the pup, holding him close to his chest to shelter him from the rain. The little one's breath warmed the side of his hand, a reminder that hope still lingered, even if faint. As Daniel carried him back toward the truck, the highway's glow shimmered in the puddles like scattered fragments of a broken mirror, reflecting a night that should have taken more than it gave. He opened the truck door with his free hand, eased into the seat, and kept the pup wrapped gently in his jacket against his chest. The storm continued to fall, but something in the cab felt still, grounded, as if the night had quietly shifted course. Daniel glanced down at the small face nestled against the fabric, tiny whiskers damp, eyes closed but no longer empty. "You hold on," he murmured, voice steady but threaded with quiet resolve. "We are going to get you warm." And as he started the engine, the faintest stir from the little body pressed against him told him the fight was not over yet. The engine rumbled beneath Daniel's hands as he guided the truck back onto the highway, the wipers sweeping arcs across the glass like a steady heartbeat fighting the storm. The cab was dim, lit only by the soft glow of the dashboard, and in that warm pocket of light the puppy rested against his chest, wrapped snugly in the thick fabric of his jacket. Daniel could feel every shallow breath the little one took, each one a fragile rhythm that kept him anchored to this moment. Rain drummed against the roof, a steady percussion that blurred the world outside into a wash of gray. The headlights carved a narrow tunnel through the darkness, revealing only what lay a few yards ahead, and even that seemed to fade as quickly as it appeared. But inside the truck, something gentler settled in, a quiet purpose that pushed back the weight of the night. Daniel adjusted the heater, letting warm air drift toward the pup. The tiny body responded almost immediately, a soft sigh escaping as the warmth reached his damp fur. Daniel glanced down, his gaze softening at the sight. The pup's ears twitched faintly, as if trying to catch a sound too distant for the human ear. "You are doing good," Daniel murmured, his voice low and steady, more breath than sound. "Just stay with me a little longer." A few miles passed before he noticed a small tremor roll through the puppy's body. Not from fear, not from pain, but from the slow return of warmth. It encouraged Daniel more than he expected, stirring something quiet inside him, the same instinct he once felt on long deployments when a life depended on steady hands and calm breath. The storm continued, though its rhythm softened, becoming less a threat and more a reminder of the world they were moving through. The smell of rain seeped through the vents, mingling with the faint scent of the puppy's fur and the fabric of Daniel's jacket. As he drove, he kept one hand on the wheel and the other gently cupped around the puppy's back, steadying him with a touch that felt almost like a promise. The veterinary clinic was still miles away, tucked near the edge of town, a 20-minute drive in good weather and longer in a storm like this. Daniel knew the distance, knew the time it would take, but he also knew the quiet determination rising within him. He would reach it. The puppy stirred again, shifting slightly, his nose brushing against Daniel's palm. The tiny movement was barely there, but enough to make Daniel's breath catch for a moment. "That is it," he whispered. "Just keep fighting." The truck rolled on, tires humming across wet pavement, soaking in the glow of distant streetlights beginning to appear through the rain. Each light felt like a small point of guidance, leading them forward. The night no longer seemed as heavy as before. The storm still lingered, but inside the cab there was warmth, breath, and the fragile persistence of life refusing to let go. And Daniel, steady in the glow of the dashboard, carried that life as if it were the only thing that mattered in the world. The lights of town grew clearer through the rain as Daniel guided the truck along the final stretch of highway, the gentle hum of the heater filling the cab with a warmth that pushed back the cold edge of the storm. The puppy remained tucked against his chest, wrapped snugly in the jacket, his tiny breaths brushing softly against Daniel's hand. Each rise and fall carried a fragile steadiness now, faint but present, like a candle holding on in a long night. A stoplight glowed red ahead, shimmering through the rain-slicked windshield. Daniel slowed, letting the truck ease to a gentle halt. The world outside glowed in blurred reflections, reds and ambers rippling across wet pavement. In the quiet pause, he looked down at the small face nestled against him. The puppy's eyelids fluttered, not fully opening, but responding to the warmth in tiny acknowledgments that stirred something deep within Daniel's chest. "Almost there," he whispered, his breath soft over the storm's muffled rhythm. When the light turned green, he rolled forward, the truck's tires slicing gently through shallow puddles. The veterinary clinic came into view just beyond a row of dimly lit storefronts. Its sign glowed faintly, casting a pale blue hue across the sidewalk. The parking lot was nearly empty, the hour far past when most people would be out in weather like this. Daniel pulled into a spot near the entrance. The rain had eased to a soft drizzle, but the air still carried the crisp scent of the storm. He turned off the engine and sat still for a moment, letting the quiet settle. The puppy shifted slightly, a tiny hum rising from his throat, not quite a sound of distress, but an attempt to respond to the movement. Daniel's palm eased over the damp fur, steadying him gently. "You are doing great," he murmured. "Let us get you inside." He opened the door carefully, shielding the puppy with his arm as he stepped out. The cool air brushed his face, but the warmth of the small body against him grounded everything. His boots tapped softly against the wet pavement as he crossed to the entrance, the glass doors reflecting his silhouette and the small bundle pressed close to him. Inside, the lobby lights cast a warm, amber glow. A faint scent of antiseptic lingered in the air, clean and reassuring. A night receptionist looked up from her desk, surprise softening her features when she saw what Daniel carried. Without raising her voice, she stood and motioned him forward, her concern immediate and gentle. Daniel stepped through the doorway, the warmth of the clinic settling around him like a quiet promise. The puppy nestled deeper into his jacket, his breath brushing steadily against Daniel's palm. It was faint, but it was life. Daniel exhaled slowly, gratitude mixing with the lingering tension of the night. Whatever happened next, they had made it this far together, one fragile breath at a time. The receptionist guided Daniel down a quiet hallway, her steps soft against the polished floor as the gentle hum of overhead lights filled the space. The warmth inside the clinic contrasted sharply with the cool drizzle outside, wrapping Daniel in a sense of calm he had not realized he needed. The puppy rested peacefully in his arms, his small body still wrapped in the jacket, barely moving except for the faint rise and fall that let Daniel know he was still fighting. A veterinarian entered the room moments later, a woman in her early 40s with kind eyes and a steady presence. Her name tag read Dr. Ellen Harper. She offered Daniel a reassuring nod before motioning to the examination table. "Go ahead and set him here," she said softly, her voice gentle enough not to startle the fragile life he carried. Daniel placed the puppy on the table with the same care one would use to lay down something sacred. The soft light above illuminated the tiny frame, the damp fur, the delicate breaths that wavered like distant whispers. Dr. Harper draped a warm towel over him, her movements slow and deliberate. "He is very cold," she murmured, pressing a stethoscope to the puppy's chest. Daniel stood close, one hand resting on the edge of the table, unable to step back. The rhythmic tapping of rain against the window blended with the soft sounds of the clinic, creating a cocoon of quiet urgency. After a moment, the veterinarian spoke again. "His heart is faint, but it is steadying. That is a good sign." Daniel exhaled, a breath he did not realize he had been holding. The puppy stirred slightly, nudging the towel with his nose as if acknowledging the warmth. Dr. Harper adjusted the heating pad beneath him, then wrapped another layer around his small body. "What happened?" she asked gently. Daniel shook his head. "Found him on Highway 47. Alone. I could not just drive by." The doctor's expression softened. "Most people would not have stopped in weather like this." Daniel's gaze drifted to the puppy's tiny paws, barely the size of his thumb. I did not feel like I had a choice. Dr. Harper gave a small, knowing smile. Sometimes the right things do not feel like choices. She continued her examination, her hands steady, her eyes focused yet compassionate. The puppy's breathing grew a bit deeper, a gentle shift that seemed to lighten the room. Daniel noticed it, hope rising quietly in his chest. The veterinarian straightened. He needs warmth, fluids, and rest. We will monitor him closely. It is going to take time, but he is responding. Daniel nodded, the tension in his shoulders easing for the first time that night. The storm outside had softened to a faint patter, as though the world was giving them space to breathe. He stepped closer, brushing a fingertip lightly along the edge of the towel. The puppy's ear twitched, a tiny gesture that felt like the first spark of morning after a long night. "You keep fighting," Daniel whispered, his voice steady but threaded with quiet emotion. "You are not alone anymore." And in that warm, still room, surrounded by the soft hum of life returning, it felt true. Dr. Harper continued her careful work, adjusting the heating pad beneath the puppy and checking the slow rhythm of his breathing while Daniel remained close, his presence steady and grounding. The clinic room felt quieter now, the lights casting a warm glow across stainless steel surfaces and soft towels. Outside the window, the drizzle softened to a mist that clung to the glass, blurring the night into gentle shapes. Daniel watched as the tiny chest rose and fell, still fragile but steadier than before. Each breath felt like a quiet victory, a whisper of possibility returning to a life that had nearly slipped away on the cold stretch of highway. The veterinarian prepared a small line of fluid, her movements precise and gentle. "This will help him stay hydrated," she said softly, glancing toward Daniel as if to reassure him that everything being done was meant to guide the puppy back toward strength. Daniel nodded, his gaze fixed on the small bundle wrapped in warm towels. The puppy stirred faintly at the change in temperature, nudging his nose deeper into the fabric as though searching for a familiar scent. Daniel reached out, letting his fingertips rest lightly on the edge of the towel. The contact was minimal, but the puppy responded with a tiny, almost imperceptible sound, a soft hum that brushed against the silence like a fragile greeting. Dr. Harper smiled at the reaction. "He knows you," she said. "Even small animals sense who holds them with care." Daniel remained still, absorbing the words without responding immediately. His past deployments, his long nights on distant bases, the weight of duty and memory, all seemed very far from this quiet room where a new purpose had slipped unexpectedly into his arms. The veterinarian stepped back for a moment, allowing the warmth and fluids to work. "We are past the most critical point," she said gently. "But there is still a long way to go. He will need rest, warmth, and someone nearby for the next few hours." Daniel looked up, understanding what she meant. "I can stay," he said without hesitation. "I am not going anywhere." Dr. Harper nodded, as if she had expected nothing less. She pulled a chair close to the examination table. Daniel sat, leaning forward with his arms resting on his knees, eyes never leaving the small figure curled beneath the towels. The soft light wrapped around them both, as though the room itself recognized the fragile moment unfolding. Minutes passed, then more. The puppy's breathing grew steadier, his small body relaxing under the gradual return of warmth. A faint twitch of his ear caught Daniel's attention, followed by a tiny stretch of his paw beneath the towel. It was barely anything, but to Daniel it felt like the night shifting, the first hint of morning in a sky still dark. He leaned in closer, his voice a low whisper. "You are stronger than you know," he murmured. "Just keep going." The puppy exhaled gently, his breath warming the air between them. And in that small, fragile sound, Daniel felt something settle inside him, a quiet conviction that the road ahead, however uncertain, was one they would walk together. The clinic grew quieter as the hours slipped deeper into the night, the soft hum of equipment blending with the steady whisper of mist against the windows. A calm warmth filled the small room where Daniel sat beside the examination table, his posture steady yet softened by the exhaustion of the long, storm-soaked journey. The chair beneath him creaked slightly each time he shifted. But he never moved far from the tiny bundle of towels where the puppy rested. Dr. Harper returned briefly, her steps light, her expression thoughtful as she checked the monitor that tracked the puppy's breathing. A gentle nod followed, a silent gesture that reassured Daniel more than words ever could. "He is responding well," she said softly. "This is the best we could hope for at this stage." Daniel gave a quiet nod, his gaze fixed on the small shape beneath the warm towels. The puppy's breathing had taken on a new rhythm, still delicate, but steadier with each passing minute. It was the kind of change a trained soldier noticed, tiny signals that spoke louder than anything else. Dr. Harper stepped out to prepare additional supplies, leaving Daniel alone with the soft glow of the overhead light. The room felt suspended in time, held in that gentle space where hope and uncertainty sit side by side. Daniel leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, his hands clasped loosely. For a moment he simply watched, letting the warmth of the room settle into him. The puppy stirred again, a slight shift, a faint sound that fluttered like a small breath of wind across a quiet field. Daniel moved closer, instinct guiding him. His fingertips brushed lightly along the towel's edge, careful not to disturb the fragile rest the puppy clung to. "I am right here," he whispered, his voice low and even, threaded with calm assurance. The puppy responded with a soft exhale, tiny but present. It drifted into the air like the first warm breeze after winter, fragile but promising. Daniel closed his eyes briefly, letting the moment anchor him. Memories of long nights on distant bases flickered through his mind, nights when he had waited beside injured teammates or watched over them in silence, knowing that sometimes the smallest shift in breathing could mean everything. But this felt different. This felt personal. When he opened his eyes again, the puppy's paw had slipped free from the towel, resting gently on the edge of the heating pad. It was small, delicate, no larger than a silver dollar, but the simple gesture carried a weight that drew a quiet breath from Daniel's chest. Dr. Harper returned, her presence warm and unobtrusive. She observed the tiny paw, the subtle change in posture, and smiled faintly. "That is a good sign," she said. "He is finding his strength." Daniel nodded, his voice soft when he spoke. "He has fought this far. I think he wants to stay." The veterinarian adjusted the towel gently. "Animals surprise us," she said. "Sometimes the smallest ones carry the most resilience." The room fell into a peaceful stillness again, the kind that wraps around two lives finding their connection in the middle of a long night. And as the minutes stretched on, the fragile rise and fall of the puppy's breath continued, steady and quiet, as if echoing a promise he was trying to keep. The night stretched into a deeper stillness as the minutes passed, the soft glow of the clinic lights casting gentle halos across the room. Daniel remained in his chair, his posture steady but softened by the quiet weight of waiting. The faint hum of the heating pad blended with the distant tap of mist against the windows, creating a calm rhythm that filled the space like a low, comforting lullaby. The puppy lay curled beneath the warm towels, his breathing steady but shallow, each rise of his chest a fragile step toward life. Dr. Harper stood nearby, her presence calm and observant as she checked her notes and monitored the gentle pulse beneath the small frame. She offered a soft smile, one that carried reassurance but also the unspoken truth that they were not beyond the fragile edge yet. Daniel leaned forward, folding his hands loosely as he watched the tiny form before him. He felt a quiet tension in his chest, the kind that came from wanting to protect something so delicate, knowing he could not do more than stay close and give his presence as an anchor. He had lived through storms, long deployments, and sleepless nights where hope hung by a thread, but there was something different about this moment. It was quieter. Closer. It settled in places he had not visited in a long time. The puppy shifted, a small movement beneath the towel, as if pushing against a boundary only he could feel. One ear twitched, followed by a tiny sound, a faint breathy noise that barely brushed the air. Daniel moved closer, his voice soft and low. "You are doing good," he whispered. "You take your time." The pup's paw slipped free again, resting gently on the edge of the heating pad. The movement was weak, but it carried intention, a subtle spark that pushed against the quiet of the clinic. Dr. Harper observed the gesture with a thoughtful nod. "He is trying," she said. "Sometimes small efforts like that tell us more than anything else." Daniel nodded slowly, his eyes never leaving the little one. "He has spirit," he murmured. "Even when he can barely move." The veterinarian adjusted the towel one more time, ensuring the warmth stayed close. "He does," she agreed. "But he still has a long climb ahead." The words were gentle, not discouraging, but grounded in reality. Daniel felt them settle into him, steady and clear. He knew the long climb. He had lived it in his own way, step by quiet step, through moments where he had wondered if strength would return. Maybe that was why he felt such a strong pull toward the tiny life before him. The room fell into silence again, the comforting kind that makes breathing feel easier. The puppy's chest continued its slow rise and fall, and the faint glow of the lamp reflected off the warmth gathering in his small frame. Then, with a soft sigh, the puppy nudged his nose forward, pressing lightly into the fold of the towel as if reaching for something familiar, something safe. Daniel's breath caught for a moment, his fingers resting gently near the towel's edge. "There you go," he whispered, the quietest encouragement. "I am right here." And in that still room, filled with warm light and the soft pulse of hope, the fragile moment held steady, as if cradled by something greater than either of them could name. The quiet room felt suspended between night and morning, that thin place where light had not yet claimed the edges of the world but hope had begun to breathe again. Daniel remained beside the examination table, his body still, his presence unwavering, the soft weight of fatigue settling into his shoulders like a gentle reminder of the long road that had brought him here. The puppy rested beneath the warm towels, his small frame rising and falling in a rhythm that felt steadier, more certain, as if each breath found firmer ground than the one before. Dr. Harper checked the monitors once more, her expression thoughtful, her eyes carrying both caution and encouragement. She adjusted the heating pad slightly, then stepped back with a slow nod. "He is holding on," she said quietly. "This is a very promising sign." Daniel gave a faint nod, the corners of his mouth softening just slightly. "He is a fighter," he replied, voice low, steady, almost reverent. The veterinarian moved calmly around the room, preparing a fresh towel and adjusting the dim overhead light so its warmth illuminated the puppy without overwhelming him. Then she paused, her focus narrowing on the tiny body beneath the blanket. Something had shifted. The puppy's breathing hitched, just once, a fragile tremor that fluttered through his chest like a candle flickering in a sudden draft. Daniel leaned forward instantly, instinct tightening inside him. "What is happening?" he asked, his voice controlled but laced with concern. Dr. Harper stepped closer, her eyes fixed on the small rise and fall of the puppy's chest. The room grew impossibly quiet, the hum of machinery seeming to fade into the background as she listened carefully. The puppy's breath slowed, each one shallower than the last, as if the effort suddenly cost more than his small body could afford. Dr. Harper placed her hand gently over the towel, her voice soft, calm, but threaded with gravity. "He is very tired," she whispered. "Sometimes when they have fought this hard, there is a moment when their body hesitates." Daniel felt the air thin around him, his heart tightening with the weight of those words. The puppy let out a soft exhale, so faint it barely stirred the towel. His tiny paw, which had rested just at the edge, slipped slightly inward, losing its gentle tension. The warmth in the room seemed to gather around him, as if holding him in a delicate embrace. Daniel reached forward, his fingertips brushing the towel near the puppy's head, his voice dropping to a whisper that barely carried beyond the space between them. "Do not give up," he murmured. "You are not alone. Not now." For a moment, nothing changed. The breathing remained shallow, fragile, stretched thin against the silence. And then, as if drawn by the sound of Daniel's voice or the steady rhythm of his presence, the puppy's chest lifted in a small but certain breath, deeper than the ones before. It rose again, then again, each one gathering just a fraction more strength. Dr. Harper exhaled softly, relief flickering across her features. "There," she whispered. "Do you see that? That is resilience." Daniel closed his eyes briefly, the tightness in his chest easing just enough for him to breathe again. When he opened them, the puppy made a soft sound, a tiny whimper that barely broke the quiet but carried all the fragile determination of a life refusing to fade. In that small sound, in that trembling breath, something shifted in the room. The night felt lighter, the air warmer, as if the fragile thread they had all been holding had begun, finally, to pull upward. The fragile breath that had just lifted the puppy's chest seemed to change the room, as if the air itself leaned in to listen. A soft warmth settled over the small space, blending with the glow of the overhead lamp and the quiet hum of the heating pad. Daniel stayed close, his chair drawn nearer to the examination table, his posture attentive yet gentle, as though any sudden movement might disturb the delicate rhythm the little one was fighting to hold. Dr. Harper watched the monitor carefully, her expression softening with each new, steady breath. "He is stabilizing," she murmured, almost to herself, but the reassurance flowed through the quiet room like a warm breeze. Daniel let out a slow breath, feeling the tightness in his chest ease. The puppy, wrapped in layers of soft towels and gentle heat, shifted just slightly. His tiny nose peeked from beneath the fabric, trembling with the faint effort of drawing in fuller breaths. The movement was small, but it carried intention, like the first leaf of spring pushing through cold soil. "That is it," Daniel whispered, leaning in closer. "You keep going, little guy." The puppy responded with a faint sound, a soft, breathy noise that brushed against the silence like a fragile echo. Dr. Harper stepped forward, checking the warmth beneath the towel. "He is starting to regulate on his own," she said. "That is a very encouraging sign." Daniel nodded, his eyes never leaving the small form. His hand hovered near the towel, not touching at first, simply offering presence, a quiet assurance that he had stayed through the darkest part and would stay through the light as well. The night outside pressed gently against the windows, no longer harsh or heavy, just a cool reminder of the world they had escaped. The mist softened the edges of streetlights, casting the room in a muted glow that made every breath feel more significant. The puppy stirred again, lifting his head the slightest bit before it settled back down, exhausted but present. Daniel felt something shift in him, a deep, quiet gratitude that rose from the place where fear had sat just moments before. "He is a strong little one," Dr. Harper said, her voice tender. "Most would not have made it this far." Daniel swallowed, feeling a warmth spread through him that had little to do with the room's temperature. "He did not give up," he murmured. "He chose to stay." The veterinarian offered a soft nod. "Sometimes all they need is a reason." The words lingered in the air, gentle and true. Daniel looked at the puppy, at the way his chest now rose with more confidence, each breath a small step toward life. He reached out, this time letting his fingertips settle lightly on the towel near the puppy's paw. The tiny paw twitched, curling slightly toward the touch as though acknowledging the presence that had carried him through the storm. Daniel felt the moment settle deep inside him, warm and grounding. "I have got you," he whispered. "You are safe now." And in that quiet room, filled with soft light and the steady rhythm of a life returning, the fragile night began to feel like the beginning of something new. The clinic's quiet warmth held steady as the night stretched toward dawn, the soft hum of equipment blending with the slow, steady rhythm of the puppy's breathing. A faint glow began to gather at the edges of the window, a pale hint of morning pressing gently against the mist. Daniel remained seated close to the examination table, his posture relaxed now, the strain that had once tightened his shoulders replaced by something calmer, something almost peaceful. The puppy lay nestled beneath the soft towels, his small chest rising with more confidence than before, each breath no longer a fragile struggle but a gentle step forward. His paws twitched from time to time, small movements that suggested dreams or instinctive searches for comfort. Dr. Harper entered quietly, carrying a small bowl of warmed formula and a tiny dropper. She offered Daniel a soft smile, the kind that comes only after witnessing a life return from the edge. "If he wakes enough, we can try giving him a little of this," she said. "Just a small amount to see how he responds." Daniel nodded, adjusting his chair a bit closer. The puppy seemed to sense the shift, his ears giving the faintest twitch beneath the towel. Dr. Harper lowered the light slightly, casting a soft golden glow over the table before stepping back to allow the moment to unfold on its own. Daniel leaned forward, his voice low and gentle. "Hey, little one," he whispered. "Morning is coming. You made it through the night." As if responding to the warmth in his tone, the puppy stirred, lifting his head just enough for his nose to emerge from the towel. His eyes were still half closed, heavy with exhaustion, but there was awareness there, a soft recognition that flickered like the first spark of dawn. Daniel reached out slowly, resting his fingertips near the puppy's tiny paw. The little one pressed weakly against the touch, barely noticeable yet filled with intention. Dr. Harper stepped forward, the dropper ready. "Let us see if he will take a little," she murmured. Daniel steadied the towel as she placed a drop near the puppy's mouth. For a moment, there was stillness. Then the puppy's tongue flicked out, gathering the small droplet. It was a tiny gesture, but his body reacted with a little swallow, fragile but determined. Daniel exhaled softly, the sound thick with relief. "There you go," he whispered. "You are getting stronger." The puppy tried again, taking another small droplet. His eyes fluttered closed for a moment, as if savoring the warmth spreading through him. His breaths, though still soft, now carried a steadier rhythm, each one an affirmation of the life he was choosing to hold on to. Dr. Harper smiled warmly. "This is very good," she said. "He is responding just the way we hoped he would." Daniel nodded, watching the tiny movements with a sense of quiet awe. He had seen resilience in many forms during his years of service, but none quite like this small, trembling creature finding strength breath by breath. The room fell into a gentle stillness again, the kind that feels earned, like a calm after miles of uncertainty. Daniel kept his hand near the little pup, offering warmth without pressure, presence without demand. The puppy shifted once more, nestling deeper into the towel, his tiny body settling with a soft sigh that felt like trust. And in that soft, early glow of morning, something unspoken passed between them, a quiet acknowledgement that this small life was no longer fighting alone. Morning light slowly gathered at the edges of the clinic windows, soft and golden, tinting the room with a gentle warmth that felt almost like a blessing after the long, uncertain night. Daniel remained beside the examination table, his chair pulled close, his focus steady on the tiny life curled beneath the towel. The puppy's breathing had grown stronger, each rise and fall carrying a new steadiness, as if his small body had finally found a rhythm it could trust. Dr. Harper returned with a clipboard, though her attention rested mostly on the puppy, her expression touched with relief and something like pride. "He is past the most critical point," she said softly. "Not entirely out of danger, but he is fighting with everything he has." Daniel let the words settle, feeling their weight and their hope. He leaned in closer, watching the tiny movements beneath the blanket, the flicker of an ear, the gentle twitch of a paw. They were small signs, but they were the kind that changed everything. The veterinarian adjusted the heating pad once more, making sure the warmth stayed consistent. "Most puppies this young would not respond so quickly," she said. "It takes a strong will to come back from that kind of cold." Daniel nodded slowly. "Maybe he just needed someone to stay with him," he murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. "Maybe that was enough." Dr. Harper's smile was soft. "Animals sense presence," she said. "They know when someone is with them for more than just a moment." She stepped back, giving Daniel and the little one their space again. The puppy shifted, his nose pressing gently into the towel before lifting just slightly, as if testing the air for something familiar. His eyes fluttered open, not fully, just enough to reveal a faint glimmer of awareness. It was the first time Daniel had seen those eyes with intention behind them, and the sight struck him like a still, quiet truth. He leaned closer, his hand hovering near the puppy without touching. "There you are," he whispered. "I see you." The puppy let out a tiny sound, no louder than a breath, but filled with a softness that carried deeper than its volume. His head nudged toward Daniel's hand, weak but deliberate, as if reaching for the warmth that had steadied him through the storm. Daniel lowered his fingers gently onto the towel, letting the small head rest against them. The connection, simple and delicate, sent a warmth through him that loosened something deep inside, something he had kept guarded for far too long. Dr. Harper watched quietly from a distance, her expression approving but unobtrusive. "That kind of response," she said, "only happens when an animal feels safe." Daniel did not look away from the puppy. "He is safe," he said softly. "I promise you that." The morning light brightened, casting a soft glow across the table, illuminating the little form nestled in warmth and gentle care. The puppy's breathing steadied even more, his small body relaxing against Daniel's touch, as if surrendering to trust at last. And in that fragile, glowing moment, surrounded by quiet promise, something unspoken settled between them, rooted not in fear or urgency, but in the gentle certainty that two lives had found their way toward each other for a reason that needed no words. The morning light continued to brighten the clinic room, turning the mist on the windows into a soft shimmer that made everything feel gentler, quieter, as if the world itself was taking a calm breath with them. Daniel remained close to the examination table, his chair drawn near, one steady hand resting lightly along the towel where the puppy lay. The small body, no longer trembling with uncertainty, rose and fell in a calm, even rhythm. Each breath seemed to root him more firmly in the world he had almost slipped away from. Dr. Harper stepped in once more, her movements unhurried, her presence warm. She checked the monitor, then the towel, then the tiny nose peeking from beneath the blanket. Everything in her expression softened. "He is holding steady," she said. "I think he has chosen his direction." Daniel looked down at the little one, who shifted just enough to nudge his paw toward Daniel's fingers. The touch was faint, almost weightless, but full of quiet intention. Daniel's breath caught, not in fear now, but in a deep and quiet gratitude that settled through him like warmth spreading from a fire. "He made it through the night," Daniel whispered. "Stronger than I thought possible." The veterinarian nodded. "Some lives recover not because they were expected to," she said softly, "but because they were given a reason to try." The words lingered in the air, gentle and true. Daniel let them sink into him as he watched the puppy's eyes flutter open, just for a moment. There was a softness there, a calm trust that had not been present before, and it anchored something inside Daniel that had been drifting for far too long. The room grew quiet again, the kind of quiet that feels like a blessing. Dr. Harper stepped back to give them space, sensing something unfolding that did not need her voice. The puppy shifted once more, lifting his head just enough to rest it against the curve of Daniel's hand. It was a small movement, imperfect and slow, but filled with meaning deeper than words. Daniel closed his hand slightly, creating a warm cradle for that fragile gesture. "You are safe now," he whispered, barely more than breath. "I have you." The puppy let out a gentle sigh, a sound so small yet so full of peace that it made the room feel still in a way that felt almost holy. The morning light washed softly over them, drawing out the warm tones in the towel, the polished steel of the table, and the quiet strength in Daniel's posture. In that glow, the puppy's chest rose with a calm confidence, as though his small body had finally remembered how to trust the world. Daniel felt his own breath match that rhythm, steady and grounded. It was not triumph or celebration that filled the room, but something quieter, something like grace settling gently over two lives that had crossed paths in a storm neither of them had expected. And in that quiet overlap of breath and warmth, it became clear that the night had not ended in loss, but in a kind of beginning, tender and humble, carried not by grand miracles but by the smallest act of mercy that had saved them both in different ways.